Hello and welcome to the At the Forefront podcast. I'm Sam Belden, head of content at Forefront Communications. With me today is Ian McIntyre, managing director and global head of market data at Pico. Ian, welcome to At the Forefront.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, good to be with you today. So Ian works heavily on Pico's Redline software, and so he brings a great perspective on the evolution of trading infrastructure. And so today we've got a great episode planned on how market shifts and trends that we're seeing today are reshaping trading infrastructure. And we'll touch on trends across electronification, multi-asset visibility, and how Pico Redline can help solve for some of the challenges that market participants are facing around all of this. So that's the short version, and encourage everyone to stay tuned until the end of the episode. Ian will give us a little peek into Redline's product roadmap, looking, in the near to medium term. But Ian, I want to pass it over to you. I sort of gave a high level overview, but for listeners who may not know Pico or may not know Redline, can you give us an overview of that product and how it fits into the trading stack?
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. Thank you. So Pico is a vendor that's sort of 15 plus years old now, and it's a very wide range of products and services. Specializing in helping firms in the front office, especially, connect to markets, providing infrastructure, software, analytics, and a variety of products and services, to help customers, connect to their peers and the markets easier. Um, a lot of those challenges, revolve around technology. We, provide a fairly unique kind of set of assets. A lot of clients have to purchase infrastructure software from different companies. A lot of what I hope to touch on today is just to show, Pico's kind of value proposition, how, we're a sort of a full stack vendor in that regard. Um, Redline, as you mentioned, we hope to focus a bit on that today. Redline is a company, a product that Pico acquired. Redline was previously an independent business, and it's a low latency software provider, providing feed handling technology for real time market data, as well as order execution software and technology.
Great. Appreciate that overview. Now, at a high level, could you give us an overview of some of the industry trends that are driving demand for products like Redline?
Sure. Um, a lot of what I'm going to talk about today focuses around sort of high performance messaging and low latency technology. And going back in time a little, a lot of those products and technologies were, specific to certain areas and asset classes within capital markets, most especially equities. And a lot of this comes from, the need for low latency, also kind of big data problem in real time market data. Some of the data feeds having many sort of hundreds of thousands, millions of messages per second. And there was a whole wave of products and technologies built around solving for those challenges in the equities and listed derivatives markets. If we fast forward to today, there's vendors like ourselves with extremely mature products in that area. And a lot of what we've been seeing in the last couple of years is how companies are considering, you know, having their own, I guess, technology rethink. Maybe a large bank or a large hedge fund that might have had silos with equity technology and, say, fixed income technology departments being completely separate, trying to provide standards internally so that they can use some of these, lower latency systems in other areas and other asset classes. And that's been something that has just frankly been accelerating, and obviously has suited our product roadmap quite nicely. And really, in the past few years, as you'll hear with our story, part of our development has largely been focused around just keeping up with the demand and building Redline into FX, into fixed income, and just growing our coverage and making it truly cross asset. So that applies with Redline, but also more generally at Pico. The same can be said about infrastructure and connectivity, as well as our Corval product, which is used, around the industry and across the different asset classes.
Sure. Makes sense. And now you brought up fixed income, and I know that that's one area where Pico has been vocal in the past. it has lagged a little bit in terms of modernization of high performance trading infrastructure. Can you tell us a little bit about that gap and what's changing now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think you're right, and certainly, fixed income has a whole market structure unto itself. Some areas of it, frankly, I'm definitely no expert. It's so vast. Some pockets of the fixed income industry have very specifically been driving towards more of a equities like low latency market structure. Well, part of the market structure is kind of obviously bringing people an advantage to have technologies like that. Um, the first area, probably years now in the making, has been US Treasuries or rates, as it gets known. Um, and when you look at how the exchanges have evolved, it's very like stuff that we consider common in the equities markets. So exchanges, lots of M&A in the exchange and in the exchange industry around US Treasuries, new markets opening, um, just becoming more electronic on the exchange side, having central limit order books and being in co-location. Like these are all things that we're very kind of seem commonplace in other parts of the industry, but in US Treasuries, that's been a shift over years. And with that change, obviously customers, the types of clients that connect directly to these venues are a little bit more specific. There's the primary dealers in the fixed income markets, um, and there's less, I guess, connectivity from the buy side directly into markets where this primary dealer role gets played.
Mhm.
So we've just been seeing a shift in the demand for customers to get access to things like low latency data feeds. And certainly the primary dealers maybe looking at systems that they haven't refreshed in 10, 20, or more years, and then having opportunities for vendors like ourselves who have a sort of an experience in the low latency stack, but have had to learn how the fixed income market differs. And that's been a huge learning curve for us. That we've been lucky to go on with a number of large firms and have been quite successful selling our technology now around that industry in US Treasuries. In more recent years, I guess that whole situation I've described has been evolving now into Europe in particular, and that's been a big focus for us the past couple of years. Bringing our technology to the European rates markets and making that available to a number of the key dealers in the EGB environment here. So that's really the story for us in regards to fixed income.
Great. You touched a little bit on the value of that perspective that Pico brings across asset classes. And I know that, one theme that I think a lot of firms in this space are seeing is firms are looking for technology that works across business units as opposed to working in silos. Each desk has its own solution. Can you tell us a little bit more about why that ability to use technology that works across business units is becoming a bigger priority? What's at play there?
I think it's kind of a natural evolution. Obviously, there's a cost synergy story there. Any big firm that is doing similar things but in different departments, and certainly the a number of the big banks that we're working with. Obviously, the business units are separate, but the technology teams are restructuring to become central.
Mhm.
Having something like a reference architecture for their algorithmic trading stack. They want to use a vendor or a set of vendors and deploy that across different asset classes, different regions. That's a huge multi-year undertaking and requires the sort of investment and commitment. Um, and it's by no means easy. You're untangling decades of systems and technology. So a lot of what we've seen is obviously it's easy to start with something new, rather than try to pull out some existing systems. So a lot of projects start with maybe a drive into a new market, a new internal system that you know sparks that agenda, and it sort of flows from there. So really, it's that drive to reduce cost, be more efficient, and in the end, try to do those things, but at the same time, bringing a better and newer version of the same thing to markets. Um, for us, it's an interesting journey. Like we obviously interact with lots of different firms trying to achieve the same stuff. Um, I had a recent conversation with a customer who was very skeptical. Somebody that's lived in the fixed income industry and has been through waves of their firm, in his words, kind of forcing the equities technology upon them, and it never quite worked. And so I think really I can completely relate. And some of the stuff we've done has taken a commitment on our side and an understanding, to learn parts of the industry that might seem straightforward, but something like trading rates is wildly different and requires our teams to have different skills and to be credible in that market takes a lot of effort. So it's by no means a straightforward task, but I think as with more and more firms kind of motivated and determined to make this successful, we've been lucky to be part of that journey and hopefully it can continue. And I'm sure it'll evolve further in the years ahead and there'll be some other interesting projects and other areas that we'll get to focus on after rates and whatever comes next.
Great. Well, thanks for walking us through that evolution. Sticking with this sort of theme of consolidation, obviously, some providers that sell into this space handle software, others handle networking. And one argument that I know that you've made is that firms increasingly value this sense of broader managed service support, where they have a single point of contact, single provider for sort of soup to nuts, what they might need in both areas. Can you tell me a little bit about why that matters in practice?
Certainly, I think there's a number of different answers I could give to that. Um, some of the recent experiences we've had where there's modernization projects, a lot of the time a technology team within a bank or a hedge fund interacting with a particular software system and may have been for years. It's often extremely opaque what networking exists behind the scenes. Certainly, there'll be a network department and a set of vendors in use, um, but things that have been around forever, people tend not to always understand. Um, so, what Pico brings, which is quite unique, obviously, as a software vendor and specialist in this area, Pico's broader infrastructure business can provide connectivity as well as hosting and managed services so that if you want to install one of our systems, you can take it yourself and install it, which many people do. But we do provide more of an extra layer that if you want to say trade on MTS in Italy, maybe you don't have staff there to manage servers, or maybe you don't really understand how the networking works. All of these things, Pico can provide sort of like a full stack from connectivity, hosting, putting your systems on a server in the right data center, obviously providing the software tools, and also managing some of that if that's what you want. And it really, dealing with one provider for all of those different things, there's lots of benefits, obviously technical benefits, but also just commercial benefits and, practical things like, inevitably when things do go wrong and they always do, there's clarity of who's responsible and you can call one number, not maybe having three, four other providers in the mix. So I think that's kind of just in general, like a very unique benefit that Pico's gained by acquiring Redline and Corbel as well, which I haven't spoken too much about, but you know, building a business where all of these things can interlink and a lot of our customers get the benefit of using all of the products together. Um, so that yeah, that's really important when we talk about these things and listen to customers' needs. I think we can just go that step further, maybe than some of the other software providers in the industry.
Yeah, makes sense. I imagine that, when things go wrong, they're chaotic on the desk, that sense of simplicity and knowing exactly who to contact, you don't have a web of contacts to untangle across different vendors, provides a tremendous amount of value. So great. Thanks for that explanation. Want to get your thoughts on a trend that I know a lot of our clients are talking about and that a lot of people in the industry are talking about. Overnight trading, the march to 24-hour trading, obviously it's in the headlines a lot. From your perspective, what challenges do you see this creating? Do you have any practical advice or just any perspective on all the attention that we're seeing in this space right now?
Um, yeah, I think when I read about it and just thinking about our own company and what's going to affect us, the thing that immediately jumped to my mind was about the fact that you almost you need a global presence for this to be practical. And obviously, it's largely focused around the US, and there are lots of companies only trade US equities. They don't really need people working through the night.
Mm.
Um, global businesses have staff in Asia, Europe, and certainly from our perspective, we have this 24/7 type of approach to all of what we do. So I was almost, yeah, it was kind of like a comfort factor that Pico happens to be in a business where that is something that's kind of routine for us, but so many firms may not be in that position. So I think this whole, just the practicality of supporting things that are outside of the normal business hours is no mean feat. And just from a technologist and thinking how that works for people, it's difficult. Um, Clearly, there's I guess there's multiple angles to the whole conversation. One of them is about getting, retail traders more access out of ours. That this whole sort of crypto world and how everything's available at all times is coming to more traditional asset class. Um, but also, so there's like a maybe for somebody that's sitting at night doing something on their phone, like that's now there's a market there, but also this whole story extends beyond that to institutional businesses in other countries. So again, like for us, when we thought about this, one of the big ideas was, can we all of a sudden start thinking about supporting this? And our Asia sales team, our European sales team, there should be companies in these other regions that are all of a sudden now finding better availability in the US. And obviously, we've got global networks and have all of the pieces to knit that together. Um, on the institutional side, there has been demand. It's not been like, our phones haven't been ringing off the hook or anything, trying getting companies connected up. So I guess my view would be it's still in an early stage, and these things in capital markets happen slowly. Certainly with regards to technical change. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Maybe maybe in the months ahead, we will see more and more institutional clients wanting the kinds of services we sell, and we've definitely had a lot of demand in the US. Ironically, based on what I've just described,
Yeah.
but um, yeah, so sort of, yeah, I don't know. It's a funny one. There's definitely a lot of PR, and there's certainly more. There's more liquidity in other areas of the industry that there should maybe just an offset in the amount of noise around this versus the benefit at the minute. But I guess maybe some of that comes from this whole market structure debate in the US. Obviously, there's a lot changing in US equities at the minute. This is part of it.
Right.
And obviously, the retail angle maybe brings a certain amount of PR that we wouldn't be used to just in the institutional world, right? So, yeah, more to come, I'm sure. But yeah, we've went out of our way to support a lot of this already. So we're in a position where we're waiting for the big surge in demand.
Makes sense. It does feel like it sort of sits at an intersection of a lot of different trends that people are interested in, the retail angle, international access, just general debates about US market structure. So,
Yes,
it does feel like a perfect storm, from that standpoint. But interesting to hear your perspective on how Pico's responding, what the conversations have been globally, within your team, on that one. So thanks for, the perspective there. Um, Last question. I wonder if you can give us a little preview of your roadmap. What's coming down the pike for Redline, and what's going to continue to shape your product direction as you eye the next few years.
absolutely. So I think data in general is just a massive driver for us, and there's a number of different angles to that. As a big data vendor with a global network, hundreds of markets, part of our roadmap, maybe obviously, is we're just constantly adding more and more markets that we connect to based on client demand. So we largely build to order, and we've hundreds of customers. So there's this constant drive. Our roadmap looks very long and complex, but if you had to summarize it, it's just making Pico more globally comprehensive in all of the product areas that we support. Um, Data in general is just an area that, in being a real time vendor, it comes up more and more in customer conversations about how they're challenged to capture, record, replay data, whether it's for back testing, compliance reasons. There's just endless requirements that we see. And I think more of our roadmap is focused around providing tools to make that easier for customers. So I think building upon all of the stuff that we have today, we're looking for, you know, Just constantly looking for new requirements to continue to build out our software to meet client demand in that area. Um, so yeah, I think our roadmap is there's no one like little unique cool thing. It's just a constant war of attrition, adding more and more connectivity and access to different markets for different clients. And we're always willing to hear, customers' feedback and what's coming next, or looking even further ahead than 1 year to see, where it might take us.
Awesome. Well, Ian, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down today. Great conversation on the evolutions that we're seeing across asset classes, what firms are expecting and demanding of their technology partners in light of those challenges, and a little window into what's coming in the future from you guys. So, once again, appreciate it. For our listeners who would like to learn more about what Pico is up to, you can head over to pico.net. Or for a full archive of episodes of At the Forefront, you can head over to forefrontcomms.com, head over to the news and insights section. So once again, Ian McIntyre from Pico, thanks a lot for sitting down this morning and sharing your thoughts.